Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling in from Oahu, so I have to use both computer and laptop. I hope the sound is okay. It's a little delayed for me on my end, but please let me know if something is not coming through. Thank you so much for joining us today for our RFQ info session. And today, my partners, Reginald Cole and Andrea Howerton, are here to share information for interested applicants who are applying for the grant application and capacity building RFQ that King County Department of Community Health Services is leading this procurement. So overall, this RFQ is building capacity and supporting nonprofits who are wanting to apply for funding and procurements from DCHS. And we will be expanding the current pool of consultants that have been supporting previous different strategies for Best Starts for Kids and the Puget Sound Taxpayers accountability account, and the Veterans Levy. So we have a good foundation for previously been called technical assistants and capacity builder consultants. And we are leading this specific procurement to fill in some of the gaps, expand the pool of consultants to work with our growing community partners. We focus and prioritize on the smaller organizations and under 20 people staff. So these consultants that will be applying for this specific procurement will work closely with Reginald B. Cole, who is my partner, and we are the grant application and capacity building managers for this contract. And this contract will be for the next 5 years. And we will go over any of the questions that you have. And Andrea Howerton is the specific RFQ point of contact, and we'll be uploading all of today's sessions FAQs and these questions into our FAQs that will go into Zoom grants. So just to lay some ground, let's do a quick introduction. It'd be great to see who's joining us today. I see Rainstorm, another, there we go. Hello, welcome. Glad you could join us. We're just starting introductions, so good timing. I think I'm gonna unplug my headphones because I have this weird echo going on. So, okay, maybe Reginald, I could ask you to kick us off. Would that be good? And then we'll keep passing. Thanks.
For sure. So Reginald B. Cole here, pronouns he, him, work alongside Amy as a grant applications and capacity building consulting manager. And I've been with King County for almost 5 years now. Started off with Best Starts for Kids, working on the Stopping the School to Prison Pipeline strategy area. And now most recently working on this project, and similar to Amy, work on a lot of equity and social justice projects across our department, and just moving different things forward in terms of technology, really pushing the envelope in terms of how King County moves to best serve the community. So very happy to be rolling out this RFQ for all of y'all. And we can just go popcorn style, whoever else wants.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Howerton. I work in the DCHS contracts and procurement team, and I'm assisting Amy and Reginald on this RFP. Feel free to also use the chat feature. I'll be monitoring that as well as we're going through the slides.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Sofer-Dunn. I'm the Director of Education and Community Capacity Building at New Birth Center for Community Inclusion. We just received the legislative appropriation for $370K as a Black organization, probably one of the first in Skyway. So our whole goal is to help other organizations build capacity. We don't want to hold all the money to ourselves. We were able to help All Blessed in Tacoma to receive about over $400,000. They're another early learning program. So we are really trying to build that infrastructure as we are building our own infrastructure. At the same time, we also hold just a contract with the city of Seattle right now, supporting early learning providers and capacity building. I'm used to passing it. Here, Sharon.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Sharon Ho Chang, and I'm here as an individual, but was formerly managing editor at the South Seattle Emerald, just recently transitioned out, and I'm now independently doing communications consulting with a focus on, thank you for the heart, storytelling, digital media management, visual and written storytelling, some of the stuff that a lot of smaller nonprofits don't have a lot of time to do, but is so important for getting the messaging out there and reclaiming the narratives and rewriting those narratives that are so important for equity work. So I am here, and I will pass it on to, who am I missing here? Roxanne?
Hi, everybody. My name is Roxanne Hood-Lyons, she, her pronouns, with RHL Consulting, and work with a dynamic and amazing team to provide support for community-based organizations, in particular BIPOC-led and serving organizations, supporting them in the ways that they bring forward and request our help. So we have had the wonderful opportunity to work with, the past 3 years, and contract with Best Starts for Kids and DCHS and City of Seattle and other government funders to help support community-based organizations. One of our big interests is in helping community-based organizations who want to advocate and leverage their relationship with government agencies. So that's a particular interest of ours. And our team's led by the values of community, generosity, and integrity. And so it's our great honor to work in community. Thanks. Oh, sorry about that. And how about Valentina?
Thanks, Roxanne. Hi, everyone. My name is Valentina Montesinos, and I'm also, like Sharon, a one-woman kind of show here. And I run Montesinos Financial Consulting, and I do anything from bookkeeping to financial reporting and local and state taxes. I work with nonprofits such as Seattle Neighborhood Greenways and some others, and other small businesses as well. Glad to be here. And I'll pass it off to Rainstorm.
Thanks, Valentina. My name is Mari Kim. The Rainstorm just got stuck on there. I haven't figured out how to change it yet. I am presenting as an individual for this, although on my Zoom application, I only saw organization. And that was one of the questions I had. Were we supposed to apply as an organization? So that's a side question. Currently, I've been grant writing for a while, a lot around homelessness, experiences of homelessness. I was the director of advocacy and grants for the Sophia Way once upon a time. And most recently around food insecurity. But the work that I do, grant writing, is done sort of on the side as a side hustle, because East African diaspora community members have approached me in the last 2 years. And so I've been writing with currently with 3 of them, and writing successfully for BSK grants, etc. But as the word gets around, I found this RFQ so timely, because word is around that there is someone who they can work with. And I'm really happy to, because there's a lot of cultural sensitivities. Like, my first thing to say would be, please, anyone listening, try not to do RFPs in April. It is Ramadan. They are fasting. They fast all day. And sometimes they fast in prayer all night. So they don't have the physical capacity, the mental agility to produce the things that we need them to produce for really serious grants like BSK grants in April. So the petition is, please consider, even May is better, but just avoid April, or that's one hardcore religious, commitment that these East African diaspora community friends can't really navigate well. So that's why they're literally throwing on me, and I'm trying to navigate several of them at the same time. So I would say this comes very timely, so much so that I've thought of stepping down from my other work in order to do more of this. And if this is the way to do it, they really do need the funding to make that possible. And I want to just put in a really strong applause for King County versus, and with no dissing intended to King County Conservation. They have an approach where they only get reimbursed after the money has been spent, after receipts are produced. That kind of grant writing is a terrible model for the CBOs that we're trying to support right now. They don't have the money to begin with, and then they're told it has to come by reimbursement. So these equity issues, I hope that we can all write about them in as we apply. But if we all say that as grant writers, maybe somebody will say, oh yeah, by the way, dear King County Conservation, please reconsider your granting practices. And that's my 2 cents. And Yin, would love to hear from you. Nice mask.
Thank you. Yin, she, her pronouns with children, youth, and young adults. I'm the project manager for Restore Community Pathways, whom Reginald and Amy have been supporting. And love all your feedback. And thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Amy and Reginald to pass it on to somebody because I'm commuting right now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the warm intro. Did we allow everybody to have some space to introduce themselves? Does everyone have a chance to check in?
I think I might be the only person left. I put a little intro in the chat. My name is Alessandra. My pronouns are she, her. I work on my own as a consultant as well, and I'm just so delighted to be in the presence of so many smart and amazing folks this afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I've been able to support BSK grantees with evaluation and data consulting through BSK capacity building, and I'm here to learn a little bit more about this project as well.
Excellent. Nice to meet you, Alessandra. Thank you. I thought we had one other person call in, but I don't see them on here anymore. No? Okay, maybe they'll drop back in. I believe I didn't introduce myself. And for folks that came in later, Amy Pock, she, her, and working closely with Reginald and Andrea in King County side. And have been with King County a few years and prior in community with nonprofits. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's get started. Reginald has a great PowerPoint, and I think he'll start presenting that and sharing with us some information. So Reginald, per questions, would you like folks to chime in as questions come up, or will you be requesting different moments for questions or folks wanting to weigh in on any points?
Yes, do a mixture of both, and I'll cover that a little bit on one of the slides, and let me know if you can. I believe it should be loading up now. If you can see the slides. Okay, perfect. You can only see the slides, correct?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so in terms of questions, I'll hit on that in a slide in just a second, but definitely feel free to pause us on the specific slide that you have a question for, and or put questions in the chat. If there's anything that we can't answer directly right now, Andrew will be capturing all the questions so that we can follow up to any of those in the FAQ section of the Zoom grants. But as much as possible, we will look to answer your question here now in the meeting and document those questions and answers for you to follow up on those in a Word format versus having to come back and watch the recording. All right, so jumping right in. In terms of agenda, we'll do an overview of GACB, grant application and capacity building consultants, go over the qualifications and key elements of this RFQ, talk a lot about the scoring criteria, which is going to be the key element to determining the points that you receive from our review panel, which is the main element that helps us determine who will be awarded for this process. And then close off with any other general Q&A, whether it's specific to the slides, something that just been that's been on your mind in general, and try to cover as much as we can. The presentation portion we'll probably be able to do in about 20 or so minutes, and have plenty of time for Q&A. And again, stopping us during the presentation is just fine. We have about 15 slides or so total. In terms of questions, so you can definitely add those directly to the Zoom chat box. You can email the email that is here. So I'll pause on this slide for a moment in case you want to copy and paste it. You'll also have access to this email again in the recording. We'll put the slides in PDF, and we'll also have this email readily available to you, I believe, in Zoom Grants. If you click contact admin, it will go directly to this email. And then lastly, on Zoom Grants within the library, we will consistently be updating our library section with our frequently asked questions. So for example, let's say tomorrow, you sit down, you open up Zoom Grants, and you're looking at the application, you go, question 4 looks really weird. Reginald and Amy, can you explain blank? That question will come to us as a team, to myself, Amy, and Andrea, and we'll think of how do we best answer this question that will support all applicants to respond to. So you typically won't get a direct response to you. Instead, there would be a response to the entire group via the FAQ. And so you'll always look every Friday for that document to be updated, if not sooner. If there's something that's super, super urgent, we definitely will work with you to figure out how to get that both to the group and to you sooner. But overall, you look out for those updates on the Fridays. Let's see here. And Amy, back to you.
Great. Thanks for opening us up, Reginald. Okay, so who is this RFQ for? This RFQ is open to folks that have worked with King County before in this capacity. Our purpose is to identify qualified consultants to provide grant application and capacity building consulting to CBOs. That's community-based organizations. And in addition to our current consultants that have worked in government contracts, we really want to open up to support more of our community members who have been already working with our community organizations and perhaps are specialized in certain sectors and fields of services, and perhaps haven't been able to consult and work with government yet. And we know so many of you all have really critical services that have grown during COVID and have pivoted and changed and evolved to what the community needs. To break down a little bit of the services that this procurement is looking for, we are calling grant application consultants as GA, who supports community-based organizations in applying for DCHS funds. So that is just like this RFQ, the grant application consultants would be reached out by the community-based organizations directly, and they will say, we would like support in considering this RFQ. We believe we're qualified. Can you help us understand the RFQ language or the RFP, RFX language, and help us scope out our work and help us capture that narrative. Typically, grant assistant or grant application consultants will work with that organization up until the application deadline. And depending on where the readiness of the organization, if they have some templates or have applied a lot, that process might go quicker. But it really is to support all organizations that are on the whole scale of their readiness, if they're very new to applying for government funding, to very savvy and organizations that have been awarded before. So that is typically the grant application consultant scope of work. And ideally during that time, they would support a handful and many different organizations during RFQ, RFP. These are different types of procurements that come out, and we call them RFXs to cover all of them. And then for capacity building consultants, they offer support for organizational development and long-term sustainability for DCHS awarded organizations. And that has a whole range of services. Quite a few of you mentioned the type of work you do, from financial consulting to database systems, to organizational health and sustainability, reviews, to executive coaching, strategic development plans, the whole range that helps a nonprofit, a community-based organization really grow their organizational strength and power so that their staff and services can do their best work and have the biggest impact in our community. Go ahead, Reginald.
All right. So in terms of how does this connect to the larger DCHS work, DCHS is the Department of Community and Human Services, and all of the GACB services that we'll be providing, for some of you that have heard of like the Best Starts for Kids, technical assistance and capacity building, or the Veterans Levy, technical assistance capacity building, those contracts specifically support applicants and awardees for those levies. Our GACB will support all applicants and awardees for any DCHS contract. So, for instance, if Best Starts for Kids or the Veterans Levy roll something out, they already have dedicated services for those. So we'll likely hold off unless their funds were to run out and they needed extra support. In terms of our department, we have a ton of different RFXs coming out throughout the year. And if you go directly to the DCHS website in King County and look at on the left-hand panel, the bottom link that talks about contracting with us, you can see the current open applications, which is roughly 12. And then there's about another 40 that are projected to come out. And on those graphs, you can open those graphs, sort them, filter them. They're presented directly through Airtable. So you can start getting a pulse as to what's to come. And Amy and I will also be working on generating a document that kind of forecasts, hey, here's how many applicants we foresee coming out, here's how many potential hours there may be needed for work in different months. So to the person's comment that was talking about rolling out RFXs at a certain time and being considerate of the community, we want to be considerate and thinking of how we are rolling different pieces out and making sure that we have adequate services available at that time. That being said, we really, really want to communicate with capacity builders and grant application consultants that are awarded with you all, as well as our internal program managers, because the more equitable we can make this process, the more seamless we can make this process, the better we can set up all of King County to be able to replicate these types of processes and really do them well and put taxpayers' dollars to use in the most effective way. As Amy explained, the GAC providers offer resources and strengthen assets and sustainability of CBOs. The grant application side will really look to remove linguistic, cultural, and procedural barriers that might prevent qualified organizations from seeking DCHS funding. And the capacity building side will support CBOs to strengthen that sustainability long term. So even in those statements, they may sound vague. It's just like, well, are there certain categories? Yes, we will have certain categories that you'll be able to choose and select. But that being said, it's not solely limited to that, because we know every CBO will have its own unique needs in terms of what it looks like to strengthen their organization, increase their sustainability, and everyone will have different needs in terms of applying for grant applications. But all in all, that is how this RFQ will look to support our Department of Community and Human Services and hope to model the future work for throughout the county.
This is a summary of our application process timeline. The RFQ is open for 1 month and it closes on May 9th at 2 p.m. And that allows for Zoom grants to be able to process all the applications. And I believe Zoom grants is the East Coast company. So it just gives us a little bit of time during that business day. For available funds, we have $800,000 total for all applicants per year. So there's a little footnote at the bottom that says closely correlated to your available hours in general question number 6 in the RFQ application in Zoom grants and the amount of requests you fulfill. So there's not a determined amount of funding for your contract with King County. It will be based on fees for service, and you will invoice, I believe, monthly back to Reginald and myself per the services that you are providing. So many of your scopes of work may be long-term. Some may be project-based that are short-term. So your amount of work could vary per month. But we're not able to award for this RFQ, like, $100,000 per 5 years, per person. That's not how this one is, like many community-based organizations receive. This is specific per service that you are providing. And there's also no guaranteed amount of funding or amount of hours that you will receive. We are growing this program out for DCHS. We believe there will be a lot of requests, and the need for capacity building especially is growing, and the understanding of capacity building being a partner for our community-based organizations is growing, in that trust that the CBOs can really work well with qualified, community-centered, lived experience consultants that King County is starting to contract with more and more, really looking at this approach equitably and making sure it's worth our community partners' time to work with consultants. So with that, the average amount of hours that Best Starts for Kids, for example, had with a consultant for an organization often was about 10 hours. And that varied for different organizations depending on the scale of need that they have. And so we know that many of our previous consultants, have, whether they have up to $10,000 a year type of service or way beyond. It just depends on how many requests there are and how often you agree to taking a specific scope of work and contract. The contract period is from July 1st through December 31st for 5 years. So the end of 2026. And we also are doing a rolling deadline for this RFQ. And we want to capture first foundational group. And then in the future, if we see gaps or we are knowing that more community consultants are hearing about this opportunity, and we also are seeing the increase in need from our community partners that are funded through King County, we will continue contracting consultants, perhaps quarterly or annually. We're not sure what that looks like yet, but there is potential for adding into our consultant pool, and we want to make sure not to overburden our existing consultants. And part of the, I think, our priorities is we know already a lot of the consultants have a lot on their plates, and many of the consultants are working across different departments. And so there is a higher need, especially in areas of financial systems, IT, and database management. And then we're really, especially looking at language capabilities. So organizations, we do feature that in the RFQ. There's an increased need to work with organizations, especially with their staff who are language specific, direct line, serving their clients who might be working with a consultant to inform them more about the program or what some of the data looks like. And those languages specifically are Spanish, Mandarin and Cantonese, and Vietnamese. And those are per the data from King County. Okay, Reginald, thanks.
Last few items to add here. In looking at the application due date, Zoom grants, their staff work on Mountain Time. So just know that as you look to reach out to them for any technical support, you keep that in mind. In terms of the available funds, as was asked in the chat, the average we put out was per project, and that's specifically for capacity building projects. We're still working on generating average numbers for other types of projects and getting more specific there. Also, consultants as a whole, for like per year, we're averaging anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. Granted, amounts could be above that or below that. It would really just depend on how much work you end up taking on. In terms of the contract period, we work in bienniums, meaning every 2 years, council will review the budget. So while the contract will be set up for this entire period of time, the funding still has to be secured for each biennium. So we will have updates on that throughout each time that that process is done. And then lastly, in terms of amount made being close to the request and your time frame, it is okay for folks to say, hey, I'm looking to do this work on the evenings or on the weekends. And thus, if a CBO has a specific need and is looking for a specific consultant to work with, and they're okay with those timeframes, that's also okay. The main thing is that Amy pointed out is there's just not a guarantee. So if you recognize, oh, I'm only offering these times and I'm maybe not getting picked up for work, you can always reach out to us and talk about, can we make adjustments? Like what are any thoughts that you have around that? And then also it's definitely okay for folks to do work over Zoom, just digital meetings, okay for folks to not have to travel. Depending on what you choose to offer, we will put that out to the CBOs. And really the main thing that we're working on internally is working on reducing insurance costs as much as possible for work that is less quote unquote risky. So say for instance, if you're working with an organization and you're reviewing their data and that may jump into HIPAA compliance, or you're working on their server and your work could highly impact all of their computers, or you're working on their QuickBooks and could highly impact their invoicing. Those would be higher risk elements and would likely require our highest qualifications in terms of insurance, versus if you're doing a Zoom call and doing a more general training to support them and give them increase awareness or increase information around a certain topic that wouldn't have those type of impacts. We are working to reduce those barriers so as many people can be at the table as possible. I believe there's one more question that came in the chat. One moment. Clarifying requests are made by organizations to work with contracted consultants. Great question. So what will happen is the awarded CBOs, Amy and I, will send a message out to all of our coworkers and say, hey, you all, we have these consultants that are ready to provide your awardees services or applicant services. The CBOs will go to a web page and they will fill out a request form. That request form will then automatically send a message to Amy and I, and we will work to match that request to the consultant that is directly linked to that request. And then you as a consultant would work directly with the CBO to develop a scope of work, send that back into Amy and I, and then we would move forward with the process that way. Let me know if I answered that question or not. Feel free to come off mute or let me know in the chat if that was answered correctly. And then the second question was, did I understand you say that there will be 10 hours to deliver capacity building? Can you say more about that? So to clarify, on average, a lot of the capacity building projects, whether they were IT, fiscal, human resources, equity and social justice, et cetera, some of the capacity building projects tended to require around 10 hours. Sometimes it was more, sometimes it was less. So we were just throwing that out as a general number to kind of keep in mind as you, just a general number to have in mind. And yes, to answer your question. Great, thank you.
And I think that goes back to what I stated about some organizational readiness. Some of the organizations were really new to government funding, so they took a while to figure out exactly what type of capacity they wanted. And then, they might have only had time to do 1 or 2 scopes of work. And because they might have a smaller staff to support managing that with a consultant. Whereas other organizations might be bigger, they've been getting funding for many years from government. They know exactly what areas that they want to do different projects. And so some organizations took really great opportunity in working with many consultants, invoiced many, many hours for many different scopes of work. And other organizations only did 1 or 2 scopes of work. And so the average typically was 10 hours per organization per month.
All right.
Did other questions come up?
Okay, so in terms of timeline, currently we are doing the information session. In terms of final day to submit questions via Zoom grants, meaning contacting admin, sending an email to that DCHS contracts email would be May 4th. In terms of applications due, that'd be May 9th by 2 p.m. We'll work on reviewing your responses between the 10th and 23rd of May, and we'll have a team. What that will look like is we'll have teams of 3 that will be reviewing roughly 10 applications each, and then coming together as a team to work on our selection process. If needed, we'll be doing interviews May 26th and May 27th. So you want to make sure that you mark those dates in case we need to hold an interview. Reference checks will happen May 30th and 31st. So make sure that your references are aware of that. And then notification of selected, non-selected applicants will be June 6th through 7th. And then anticipated contract or program start date will be early to mid-July. And in terms of the contracting process, that would be happening during right after the notification. Any questions on timeline? Okay.
Reginald, could I ask? This is Mari.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check. So when we were giving an estimate number of hours that we would be open to working, it is, I'm assuming we're, for instance, right now, if I'm working with 3 orgs and I need about 10 hours for each of them, then it's 30 hours for the week or for the month, however something is calculated. But as we look across the spectrum of the year, and I'm assuming the fiscal year for, and it's because I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but fiscal year for you guys King County must start July, is that correct? July 1, or is it the calendar year?
It's the calendar year.
Oh, okay, calendar, that's fine. I wasn't sure because of the July start, but would we be calculating like 30 hours a month for 12 months or 10 hours, et cetera? Would we be offering our available hours or guesstimating some other way? Do you all have a formula that you're expecting that we will use?
Yeah, so I'm pulling it up right now just to make sure I give the most accurate answer. Off the top of my head, I believe the question specifically spoke to monthly. It was either monthly or yearly. So let me just pull that up real quick. And this is, you'll find this in the attachment, which should start, I believe, Exhibit A, which starts on page 21 underneath general questions. Question 6, how many estimated hours per month of GA or CB will you and your team be able to provide? So one way to kind of think about this is if a average job, someone works 40 hours in a week, multiply that by 4, it's about 160 hours. if you're thinking to yourself, this is going to be my full-time gig, I can do up to 160 hours versus I may do, you know, you would approach that however you choose. And then you can even break it up if you want to say only this many hours for GA and this many hours for CB. You can break it up. That being said, this falls underneath the general questions. General questions are not scored. General questions will not, in essence, mandate how your contract is written up. This is subject to change. This is really just helping us get a general idea of what you can provide. But yes, to answer your question, it's your hours, your available hours per month.
And
And with that,
sorry, I just wanted to follow up on that question. So then the actual commitment is made once you sign up for a project and you commit to those hours. So you're just kind of saying the hours that you're available, but the actual commitment happens once you're partnered with that CBO.
Correct. So another good example is, let's say July comes around, right? And you're like, we just got a huge contract with another organization, our hours are cut in half, or I'm on paternity leave or maternity leave, or I have blank going on and my hours have decreased and or increased. That's perfectly fine. We can have that conversation then and there. And again, what happened is the CBO, when they put in the request, that will trigger the communication. So if we reach out to you and say, hey, the CBA was looking for this, this service, you know, are you able to move forward with it? It's just fine for you to say no. That's not going to negatively impact your contracting. Very similar to, say, a ride share service. Hey, we have so-and-so that needs a ride. You 3 folks fit their request. Are you interested? Okay, great. 3 of you will be able to do a meeting with said CBO, so the CBO can determine who they want to work with and then move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
For sure. Looks like we had another question come in. Our experience has been that support for emerging CBOs often takes longer than 10 hours. If we are building capacity, which can involve the work of strategic planning and coaching and how to implement depending on what the CBO desires, there's flexibility in hours and scope to meet their needs. Yes, there definitely is. And really the most important thing will come down to scope of work. So again, kind of going through the process, CBO puts in the request. We work to match CBO with US consultants. And then if y'all are going to plan to move forward, the US consultants would submit to Amy and I a scope of work. That scope of work, if there's not a restriction on, hey, this is going to require, we expect you only to spend 10 hours. Scope of work can be for half an hour, multiple hours. As long as the scope of work looks like it makes sense and the hours all line up, then we'll move forward just fine. If we notice, if we need to have a conversation, just double check on something, we can have that conversation with you before you start to work with the CBO. But yes, there's definitely flexibility around those hours. And we hands down know that every organization is going to be a spectrum of need. So while you may do a fiscal project with 3 organizations, one may need 3 times the amount of hours and another may just need a quick consultation. That's fully understandable. And what we'll be doing with this project is really looking to collect as much data as possible to report back to county. Hey, here's some of the different thresholds that we're recognizing where different organizations may need more hours and or less hours and or more assets, etc. And we need to make sure that we are requesting funding adequately. So we hands down will be using that data to advocate or to speak to speak on the needs of the organizations. And at the end of the day, you as consultants would be our clients. So we'll be gathering information from you and learning from you, as well as our program managers, who's going to be the ones in essence doing the bulk of the communication about these services. So yeah, definitely we'll be working to be as flexible as possible.
yeah, there's a few areas I just want to expand on. We do hope to award contracts for this GACB procurement, at least 10, 15 plus consultants and beyond. And so that just gives a range of what our other program partners have. Excuse me. the pool of consultants that they have. And then also we will be partnering and already have had requests from other departments across King County to consult or to utilize our consultants in the future. And that is a strong possibility, which can increase amount of hours that may be for grant application support or capacity building for the organizations that they are awarding with their funds from different departments. So that does increase the possibility of increasing hours for this consultant pool. And also we will have a handful of meetings all together as a community practice. And there may be consultants who have already been providing technical assistance or grant application consulting. And so it's a nice community practice where you can get some of the tips of the trade as well. And then the last piece I was thinking of, in the RFQ, it does talk about payment. King County, as a community practice, we've standardized our fees for consultants at 175 hours or $75 per hour. And that is based on strong feedback from the existing consultants. And then there's also a range of what's considered administrative work that is at half of that fee. So there's a little structure too.
I can quickly review this page. Also, please note that you can find all this information in section 3 underneath eligibility and qualifications starting on page 7 in the RFQ. But just try to quickly highlight or bold the key elements for quick review. So one is for folks that are awarded, we'll be looking to get a single page bio and photo to post up on our website and in our future RFXs. So looking on the left side, in terms of when a program manager in DCHS gets ready to roll out a RFX, they would look to have a pre-application conference with you, which basically they would meet with you all and say, hey, here's our RFX. We want you to get a general understanding of it. So when people start reaching out to you for grant application support, you're aware of our RFX. Support CBOs and with those procurement applications that would actually be writing the grants for them. It would be supporting them through the application process. Obviously, cultural competency as an endpoint is not something that we reach, but that is a major, major piece that we really want everyone to be working towards. Equity and social justice, King County as a whole has put out many different points around our goals for equity and social justice. So you can always learn more there, as well as our racism public health crisis initiative online as well. Number 5, ideally, any services that can be provided in multiple languages, similar to the points that Amy mentioned before, you can find a link to those language preferences right in the RFQ. And then other GA services is defined and determined by DCHS. So as we mentioned, we'll be looking to have regular meetings with you all and check-ins so we can continue to hone these services and mold them as needed to best fit you, as well as the CBOs and program managers. In terms of capacity building, same bio, same participation in meetings so we can mold the work over time. We talked about co-creating in terms of the scope of work, not just scope of work, but actually kind of talk about the needs and wants. So Roxanne, this kind of speaks to your point. It's like, let's do a general overview of your organization and what you may need. Some organizations may want and need that, some may not. So it's really as desired by the CBO. In terms of just capacity building in general, while there's multiple different categories and types of service you can provide, overall looking for folks to be doing trainings, clinics, workshops, one-on-one coaching, etc. in terms of CB, working towards that cultural competency again. And then number 6, and this actually applies to GA as well, is having that scope of work written out so that it's very clear between you, the CBO, and Amy and I, what is the work that's going to be done. And part of our process, we've heard in the past that sometimes amendments need to be made. So we'll have an added process for you put out a scope of work, you know it's going to require 20 hours. Midway through the project, you all determine, oh, this isn't working. We're going to need an additional 10. The CBO would submit the request and or the consultant, and then Amy and I would work with you all to determine, yep, this makes sense. Boom, let's add on the extra 10 hours. So we'll make sure that we have a process for that. And just double check if there are questions on that. Let's see here, Reginald. You mentioned something just a moment ago that support would be for the application. Can you clarify if you're saying GA consultants would not be working on the grant itself? So in terms of grant application support, the main thing I was trying to say is that GA consultants will not do the grant writing. This is not an application for grant writers to do the process for them, but instead consulting CBOs on the process. But yes, you hands down will be working with them on the actual grant. So if they say, hey, can you review my responses to this question? Can you mock score for me? Can you help me out with edits? What do you think about this response? Do you think I'm a good fit for this grant? Can you help me navigate Zoom grants? And I ran into this error. Anything you could think of that the CBO would need support to submit a quality application and meet all the criteria. That is what the grant application consultants will be doing. And I think another thing to add here is keep in mind, when we say consultants, when we say organization, et cetera, the community has been saying loud and clear, this isn't just something this isn't an application that's just limited to folks who have been doing this over years. This is their business, this is their bread and butter. If you have a skill set that CBOs and folks that you know have consistently communicated, hey, we would love this service, we love when you support us around this element, apply. Because a lot of times we'll have folks that say, oh, we don't have anyone specifically in the Latinx community that can speak Spanish that also can do grant application support. We don't need necessarily a grant writer. We want somebody that knows how to navigate this process and support us in this. Or we don't need blank organization for IT support. We want someone from our community that can help us break this down in a way that we understand. So please don't feel like there has to be a very specific mark that you have to reach in order to provide these services. I am going to speed up a bit because we're coming up on time. So Roxanne, let me know if that answered that, Roger that. So GA consultants do not do the grant writing per se, but consulting CBOs, reviewing responses, edits, clarifying much between grants and applying works. Yes, that is all correct. And that's what we would lay out in your, contracts. And yes, okay. So Amy, at any point in time, just pause me if you need, but I'm going to speed through the slides a little bit faster, and then we'll get to the final Q&A portion. And if anybody wants to stay on, we're happy to stay on, but we want to make sure that you all, we respect your time and you all are able to jump off at the time we stated. Okay. All right, so in terms of performance measures, really what this means is, okay, what are we going to be quote unquote graded on? Or like, what are we looking for? How do we know that this program is successful? So one, you'll be submitting monthly invoices in a tracking sheet. Tracking sheet will be showing what work that you've done throughout the month. Even if the project isn't completed, we're still looking for updates. We'll be asking you to submit surveys on the engagement. And we'll be asking the CBOs to do the same, as well as the program managers, so we can get a good pulse on how the program's going. We'll be asking for you to attend check-ins so we can review on the process. We will work to make sure that this is limited and not overbearing, and making sure that those processes, I believe, have consistently in the past been paid for. So that would be a meeting that I'm more than certain that would be included in your pay. And then the really, really important is these scopes of work, having clear scopes of work for any work that you do, because that is what we will be paying you off, and any amendments that need to be made, making sure that those are clear. In terms of scoring criteria, you can see more detailed scoring criteria on page 13, but overall, you can see there's a very, very high commitment to equity in terms of our scoring. We want to know about your knowledge and skill sets and your experience. Those are mostly broken down as examples. All these questions are very, very detailed and are broken down specifically by their points. So please, please make sure you're reviewing this document and looking at the narrative questions, because the narrative questions was what is scored and directly links to this. So at any time, if you're breathing hard, you're like, oh, it's the final countdown. What's the most important thing I need to do? This right here is the most important thing you want to make sure that you are focusing on and knocking out, and making sure that you upload all the required documents into the tabs that we request. And because even though those are not scored, they're still required, and an incomplete application can be runs the risk of not being scored at all. In terms of our review process, once you submit your application, as I mentioned, we'll have groups of 3 that will be reviewing your applications. They'll use the scoring criteria and the narrative questions to give you a score. GA and CD will be scored separately. You can get up to 100 points. And then based off that, if your application is meeting our needs and is a top score, there is a very high chance that your application will be moved through for the final process. And as I said, we may or may not be doing interviews. We'll be able to determine that as we get closer to the end of our process. In terms of application tips, really, again, I'll just say that the main thing here is being very clear about who's on your team, who's applying, being very clear on if you're doing GA or CB. Some of the questions say, if you're not doing one or the other, please just put NA. Zoom Grants will not allow you to submit unless you put NA if you're not doing one of those services. And if you're doing both, yes, you will have to fill out, I believe it's all 7 questions for GA and all 7 for CB. Is it okay for some of your answers to look similar? Yes, because some of the responses will be similar, but do make sure that they're unique in answering the questions completely. And in terms of, let's see here, additional resources, as I mentioned, there's the email up top. Our FAQ will have everything that you need. The slides from this and the video recording from this will be in Zoom Grants. And put the page numbers for some of our most important pieces. And I cannot stress enough, please look to try to find some folks that can objectively review your application and score you based off of the scoring criteria that we used. If you can do basically a mock scoring and you already know, oh yeah, I'm getting pretty darn close to 100 points, probably a good chance you're gonna have a successful application. Just make sure you're choosing folks that are rather objective and multiple people, so you can get multiple perspectives and get their feedback. That being said, we'll jump into our Q&A. I'll start right with the questions that are in the chat. Yes, Zoom Grants. Looks like that one's already answered. Where can we find what is determined as admin versus consulting hours? We will have more details for you on that further down the road, probably closer to contracting, but the easiest way I can explain it right now is content delivery and content development would be consulting hours, and any prep and or debrief or like aftermath that comes from that would fall more into admin. So if I'm preparing for a presentation, that'd be more, if I'm preparing, but I'm actually developing a PowerPoint, that would be consulting hours. I'm actually now delivering the presentation, that's consulting hours. I'm now doing follow-up notes, follow-up emails, etc. That would fall more underneath admin. Next question, is it possible? It's possible, but not easy. We recommend writing and editing Google Docs or Microsoft Word when ready, cutting and pasting into Zoom Grants. Yes, definitely would recommend that. Sometimes Zoom Grants can have its kinks. So sometimes it doesn't like bolded or italicized or underlined text. It doesn't like bullets, etc. They're getting a little bit better with that, but I would be careful with that. If you ever see, once you click outside the text box, it will say saving very briefly and it will auto save. If you ever see it blinking saving, that actually means error. It's not saving. Don't just try to refresh the page. Just don't try to copy and paste again. You need to check your browser, maybe close, maybe contact Zoom Grants and make sure that's fixed before you can continue to write. I personally have lost a day's work trying to work through Zoom Grants after it's been blinking that saving, and I just tried to work through it. Another thing to keep in mind is, again, once you submit, you can actually go back into your application and review it. So feel free to re-access a submitted application. Sorry, recommended to our clients. And there are no other questions in the chat. feel free, anyone, to come off of mute and ask any questions. And again, in terms of time, we are at 3:05, so definitely feel free to come off as needed, and we will stick around for another 5 or 10 minutes for folks' remaining questions. And definitely want to thank you all for joining.
Thanks so much, Reginald. That was such a great overview. One last piece I just wanted to speak about the, you'll notice emphasis on equity priorities in our rubrics under the scoring criteria. And earlier, one of the priorities talked about cultural competence and cultural responsiveness. And for an example, our GACB will be supporting a group of consortium of organizations that are doing abolitionist work, decriminalization for youth, and restorative healing justice work. So that the consortium has 8 nonprofits that these GACB consultants would be supporting. They might be supporting developmental disability strategies and organizations that serve, that have services for our disabled community. And so there's a range of different justice issues that our communities are doing that we really want lived experience, work experience to be highlighted in your applications.
All right. The last thing I'll share with y'all is again you'll find this on page 13. It's probably too small for you to read it, but I just want to make sure you visually, it may not be showing, 1 second. Share, resume share. Okay, here we go. Hopefully you can now see this.
And Reginald. Sorry.
Oh, I was on mute. All right, here we go. So I was just saying, you probably won't be able to see this on my screen fully, but this is the page I referenced a handful of times, page 13. This is the page you want to make your best friend. This is our scoring criteria. It breaks everything down, and this is directly linked, as you see here, to the narrative questions. So make sure that you're reviewing those narrative questions, you're looking at the scoring, and you're dedicating the time and word count that you need necessary to this. There's no really secret sauce to what it looks like to get selected. It's really, we do our best to have an objective process that's based off the scoring criteria. So, yeah.
One last question in the chat, Reginald, from Roxanne.
Okay, are you prioritizing consultants who have not worked with King County previously? Promise that is my last question. So no worries, we love the questions. It's better to get as many as possible up front, especially because we know the procurement process can be rather difficult in terms of waiting for a response later on when you have them. So even feel free to pull up the narrative questions right now, look at them, see if any of them are confusing, and ask us right now. So the priority will go to, again, based off of the criteria. You'll see some of our weighted questions. So that's obviously going to have a major impact. At the end of the day, we really are looking for folks that are going to be able to connect with our CBOs. And so that being said, we're going to have CBOs with a ton of different needs, a ton of folks that are made up by so many different individuals. So really, we'll be looking to have a very vast pool that can support all those needs. So if we can support a lot of those needs through local folks that are from King County, that are from the community, great. If we can bring in folks that have been doing this for years, great. Folks that are newer, folks that are outside of county, we really are looking just for a wide spread so that anytime a CBO says, I have a need, here's my request, and here's how I'd like for that request to be filled, we're really looking to have a general spread to meet all the needs.
It looks like people are needing to jump off and we're a little bit over our time. So with that said, Reginald, thank you so much for a really thorough overview. Andrea, so grateful for your support through this RFQ process. And Kimberly and Rainstorm, Mari, Sharon, Roxanne, Alessandra, Valentina, Sharon, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and we wish you well in this procurement process and hope to see your applications. Okay.
Don't worry.
Can I ask a quick question, or do we have
Yeah.
just really
No,
quick? Because your invitation to look through the questions, there was one part. So the nonprofits I'm working with are East African. I am not East African. What I am is a religion scholar in my past life. And it's that sensitivity to the Muslim approach to values and cultural language, et cetera, that made them, find me and then keep telling the other orgs about them. How is a respectful or culturally humble way to say, I want to have some humility around this, to say, I do bring this expertise. It's not because I'm that demographic. It's because they find a resonance in my ability to work with their community. How can I say that?
Yeah, so my answer will be somewhat vague because we can't necessarily direct you on how to best answer the question. But what I can say is